I can stand now. Hello everyone, it is Tuesday, I am Tuesday, and today we're going to be talking about Meina Gladstone, CEO of Hyperion's galactic hegemony. If you've somehow stumbled upon this video without having read the first half of the Hyperion Cantos, click off now, as this examination of Gladstone's character is going to be rife with spoilers. Instead, why don't you check out my review of either Hyperion or Fall of Hyperion? In the meantime, they're mostly spoiler-free, and I've tagged it with timestamps to help you avoid them while watching. As for the rest of you, I'd love to hear what you have to say about Gladstone down in the comments. I like to have these analysis videos work more as the beginning of a discussion, as opposed to my final word on the topic. So feel free to let me know your thoughts on what I have to say. Now, with that out of the way, let's get started. In both our world and the reality of the narrative, it can be difficult to discern between Meina Gladstone the person and Meina Gladstone the figure. Most of the story involving her is from another person's perspective, but even her point of view chapters do little to discern who she is from what she is doing. This isn't a criticism by any means, as I think her story works better with this being the case, but more an acknowledgement that any examination of her necessitates talking about who she is in relation to the force she applies on galactic politics. It's very rare to find a character you want to root for, who you feel bad for, and who you might even admire, who ostensibly deserves the horrific end that they receive. That tangle of personhood is intentionally hard to decipher, so let's start somewhere simple, and we can build up from there. Meina Gladstone is categorically evil. But wait, you might ask, isn't she the hero who saved the galaxy? No. Well, maybe, but only in a nationalist sense. As history marches on towards Endymion, it is very likely that Gladstone will be remembered as a glorious victor, a hero of the folk who annihilated the Technocore and all their dastardly wiles. She will be seen as a nationalist icon, presiding over the final days of the Empire and working only toward humanity's greater good, and all of her crimes will be brushed under the table. Like, remember how in the last video we talked about how the Consul was part and parcel to a handful of genocides? Who do you think ordered those killings? Who do you think orchestrated the grinding and homogenization of culture throughout the web? Who do you think opened the floodgates for the corporate rape of the galaxy's natural resources and labor? That's right, it's ya girl! Most of her actions, from the decades-long cultural assimilation campaigns to her hawkishness against the ousters, and even her working relationship with the Consul, are taken in the interest of business. The only exception to this comes in the form of the Technocore, but we'll get to that in a second. First, we need to talk about the Consul and permissible discontent within the government. In the last character analysis video, we talked about how the Consul acted as a rogue agent, pitting two sides of a smoldering conflict against each other in order to achieve his own ends. We talked about how he hid his hatred for the objectively unjust institutions of empirical power, how he was able to thread the needle of deception and rebellion so as to put himself in a position to act upon his beliefs, while none of the people he was playing were any the wiser. Or so we thought. In the Consul's mind, he had won. And with the information provided to us at the time of Hyperion, I was hard-pressed to see otherwise. What if I told you, though, that he hadn't? What if I told you that everything the Consul had done was exactly according to plan? I know, just hear me out. We all know that the Consul's familial history is hardly a secret, especially to the most powerful governmental institution ever to exist in the history of humanity, backed up by the most advanced protective AI technology ever to exist in the universe. With this context in mind, one might ask themselves why someone with so compromised a history, someone with all the tendencies and markers for a troublemaker in the system, would be allowed to gain the level of power and confidence that he did, because Meina Gladstone wanted him there. She wanted him to succeed, meaning all of his actions against the system fall within the realm of permissible discontent. Consider this. In relatively functional democratic governments, whichever faction is in charge of the atom bomb at any given time is going to have both enemies and detractors that need to be dealt with, while also making sure to pacify the public enough to prevent overt rebellion and revolution. In this way, it can actually be beneficial for the leaders of more democratically leaning governments to allow some actors to actively work towards destroying the system. Designated malcontents are actually a vitally important aspect of a government's control over its own population, especially for those governments who have yet to tip over into outright authoritarianism. Imagine for a moment that you are a plutocrat living in a nominally democratic nation. First of all, congratulations on being rich. I'm sure you definitely worked hard for it. Second of all, you're probably about to find yourself in a very interesting position, as there are now an entire nation's worth of lazy poros who want to take all the wealth you absolutely definitely worked for. Seeing as how you're rich, you don't want that to happen, so you need to figure out a way to make sure that it doesn't. How though? Well, some of the stupider rich people in this scenario would default to just trying to do fascism. Like, no priming phase, no trying to move the Overton window rightward, no nothing. Just straight up jumping into doing a fascism. That, rarely ever works. The slightly more intelligent of the wealthy and powerful default to eroding checks on the power of themselves and their friends. They follow campaigns of economic and cultural oppression in order to more effectively line their own pockets with as many riches as possible. These types of people don't really have morals. They don't have an internal ethical structure or even an anchor point of ideology. The only thing they live for is money, and all of the neoliberal free market policies they ram through the government are an expression of that fact. Unfortunately for these types of people, though, none of them really tend to have a spine, which means that they can be bought and paid for relatively easily. Meina Gladstone, on the other hand, is not like that. Instead, she hides within herself a core of dogmatic zealotry, which eternally pushes her towards one very specific goal: the elimination of the technocore. Over the course of many decades, Meina Gladstone works as any good corporatist drone would, all while shrouding her true intentions in the utmost secrecy. She operates in a way that the console could only dream of, playing her opponents against each other to suit her own destructive ends, all without the tell of having a tragic and thematically poignant backstory. From afar, she is an ambitious, talented, and most importantly, predictable politician, in the sense that she is more likely to do that which benefits herself and her friends than what would benefit the greater commonwealth she resides over. After all, egotistical political prodigies who are willing to snub the working class for even the smallest of shots at a few extra doubloons are the norm. Power attracts those who are most likely to use it. Corruption is the default, and anybody who plays the game long enough is imminently aware of this fact. The Technocore certainly are, and Meina Gladstone is too. It's why she plays the role that she does, goes through the motions of her seemingly endless political conquests, insisting that she is a good person, in it for the right reasons, while still reaping all the ill-gotten benefits beholden to a woman of her economic and political station. On the face of it, there isn't much to differentiate her from the other soulless corporate husks who often find themselves shambling through society's highest stratum. But there are tells, if you look hard enough. Because under the surface, Gladstone is solely dedicated to her internal ideology. I think it's important to note that Gladstone doesn't take any Paulson treatments. The majority of the hegemony's upper class use Paulson as a way to relive lost youth, boost their own egos, and just flaunt their wealth generally. It's so out of fashion growing old, don't you know? So many of the rich use it in the novel that it might as well be considered a part of their culture, but for some reason Gladstone steers clear. She isn't really interested in vainly returning her beauty. She doesn't care about wantonly prolonging her life. Instead, her mind is laser focused on a single goal which supersedes all others. A goal that if she fails, immortality wouldn't make up for it. Here's a better question. Why did the consul succeed again? Because Meina wanted him to. Letting people like him loose can be considered a form of soft power which allows for people to be filtered into movements which call for social change. Allowing them to feel like they're doing something meaningful without actually addressing any of the underlying economic issues which help to cause said social problems that are inherent to a system built on the concentration of wealth and power, like, say, capitalism. Governments do this all the time in order to suit their own ends, and Gladstone is no different. As previously stated, it is in the benefit of her wider policy goals to allow for the consul to explode everything, and would have been in the interests of the Technocore as well, had it not been for one tiny little problem. Meina Gladstone is ideologically as opposed to economically motivated. Any other person in her position would have accepted the facts of the Ouster War as they were presented, but Gladstone doesn't, simply because of the fervor which surrounds dogmatism and blots out a person's capacity for logic or persuasion. She hides it well, don't get me wrong, but even Gladstone is no stranger to the blindness associated with strictly held belief. She has become so devoted to her own cause, the destruction of the Technocore, that she is willing to sick what most would consider to be a rabid dog on the galaxy at large, ostensibly instigating a war between the hegemony and the ousters, and then refusing to believe evidence in support of the conclusion that the ouster war is exactly what happens. She ignores the advice of trusted and experienced advisors, instead sending her own lackeys and stooges on fact-finding missions in order to retrieve even the smallest sliver of evidence supporting her claims. She has decades-old friends killed in order to further her movement, has a general's entire family die in the name of her cause, listens to the ghost of a dead poet prevent revelations to her in her dreams. There is no universe in which she isn't a psychotic narcissist steering the ship, and yet we see her as one of the heroes, simply because despite all of the insanity, somehow she's right, and she lords her victory over all of us by throwing herself to the wolves like a martyr. By the time she gets torn apart by the ravenous mobs of Tau Ceti Center, Meina Gladstone has ceased being human. Her legacy is secure. Why should she have Paulson treatments now? Her work is done. There is no reason for her to keep on living because there is nothing left to live for. Her ideology was her rock. Her goal lay the foundation of her very existence. In her mind, she was going to annihilate the Technocore or die trying. In all her calculations, there was never an after. How could someone like that live through a victory? Say one thing for Meina Gladstone in the end, then say she's a statue on the side of a mountain. Her image will be remembered forever, but the person who inhabited that image was forgotten, even by herself. Hey everyone, thanks so much for getting the previous video past the mark. For those of you who weren't aware, I was only going to release this video if we hit a certain like goal, and we did, so I'm very happy about that. This video has been a super quick turnaround for me. I'm trying a new setup, obviously, but I have had a lot of fun making it, so thank you for that. I'll talk with anyone who is willing to about this series down in the comments, but going forward, I think I'm gonna have to put the Cantos on the back burner for a little while. I have a lot of other projects I want to focus on, and these first two books have already taken up a huge chunk of my year. So subscribe if you haven't already in order to catch the next Hyperion Cantos review whenever it comes out. And in the meantime, just remember that it is Tuesday, I am Tuesday, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Bye!